So we know who the Yankees will be playing starting this weekend, so let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Yankees, your daily New York Yankees podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Yankees, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm your host, Stacey. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. As you see, I am by myself today, so let's get this started. Don't forget, subscribe to the podcast on whichever podcasting platform you prefer. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube, like our videos, hit the bell so you're notified when our videos go live, and leave comments too, because that also helps with the numbers and the algorithms. So on today's show, we're paying tribute to a very important person in segment 3. We will discuss the wild card series all around baseball. But first, the Royals beat the Orioles. So for the second year in a row, the Orioles were swept out of the wild card series. I took joy in it for about 5 minutes after it happened. And then I said, okay, now we get to worry about the Royals. So it was all about pitching in that series. The Royals held the Orioles to 1 run in 18 innings. They couldn't get anything going against that pitching staff. And more importantly, the Royals bullpen didn't allow a run across 7 2/3 innings in those 2 games. Now, the Royals weren't blowing the doors off the place either. You know, the scores were 1-0 and 2-1. So it's going to be very intriguing, to say the least, to see how the Yankees fare against the Royals pitching staff. So now that we know who the Yankees are playing, let's talk about it. So the Yankees went 5-2 against the Royals in the regular season. And as we all know, the regular season means diddly squat when the playoffs start. It's just the way it is. You know, a team can be horrible against another team and beat them in a playoff series. It's that whole cliched, you all start at 0-0 and it's a reset and a restart. And it's pretty much true. So the Yankees were 5-2 against the Royals. Cole will be up against Michael Wacha in the first game. Cole has not pitched against KC all season. And I was looking at some numbers of some Yankees against Michael Wacha, and the only Yankee with a large sample size against him who has good numbers is Anthony Rizzo, who has 2 broken fingers. So keep that in mind. And the younger guys don't have a big enough sample size against Wacha. So we'll have a full preview of the division series on tomorrow's show when Brian's back, and we'll talk about everything, because I'm assuming the rest of the pitching matchups will be set. You'll see Lugo, you'll see Reagans in this series. But it's just interesting how the playoffs have gone so far. I'll talk more in depth about the other series in segment 2. But I'm shocked and not shocked by how the Orioles played in the division series, because let's be real, they struggled down the stretch. They struggled more than the Yankees, because the Yankees, after their really long funk, they had some ups and downs after that 11-24 stretch. But for the most part, the Yankees picked it up in September compared to what the Orioles did. The Orioles basically not backed into the playoffs, but kind of. They just looked awful. I think they went 33-33, right? Leading into the last or into the wild card series. I believe I saw that number on Twitter. So just as bad as the Yankees were playing, the Orioles were doing the same. And we talked about this all season. When the Yankees were in that funk, the Orioles weren't doing anything to pull ahead of them in the division. We joked about it all the time that when the Yankees had that really bad 40-game stretch, the Orioles should have been up by double digits in the division, and they just could not pull away. There was a time when the Yankees went 3-7 or 2-8 in 10 games, and the Orioles went 3-7. They just didn't do anything to capitalize on what the Yankees were doing. To be fair, the Orioles had injuries, and they had major injuries, and they had to make moves at the deadline to help with the rotation. But some of those guys that they were counting on to do things in this series, you know, Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, like all those guys were shut down in those 2 games against the Royals. And that's what happens in the playoffs. Hopefully it won't happen to the Yankees. Aaron, Judge, Juan, Soto. So we have a couple more days to get used to this and, you know, well, not get used to it, just to like get ready for it, right? But I want you all to be careful, okay? I'm gonna put my mom hat on, even though I'm only a mom to felines. I want you all to be careful. Is it better that the Orioles and Astros are out of the playoffs? Yes, of course it is. But the Astros weren't as good this year, and they showed why in that series. We'll talk about that in the next segment. Does it mean the Yankees will have an easy time with the Royals? Not at all. Not at all. Like I said, they went 5-2 in the regular season. That goes out the window when the playoffs start. And you've seen it with Yankee teams in the past where they've done horribly against other teams in the regular season. They meet them in the playoffs, and it's as if they're a completely different team and they just steamroll over them. So the Royals have that ability to do that too if their pitching is on. And you know how the Yankees have issues getting their offense going sometimes, or if Soto and Judge are the only ones doing anything and the rest of the guys don't do anything, that's also a problem. But the Royals pitching is scary. As I said, they held the Orioles to 1 run in 18 innings. That bullpen shut them down for 7 2/3 innings. That's almost a complete game there by their bullpen. So I want you all to tread lightly. Obviously, be excited that the Yankees are the best team in the AL. They have the best record. They have home field throughout. But don't think the Royals will be pushovers. Just don't go into the series thinking that. But I'm happy. This is great. So we have 2 more days to prepare. I think it'll be a good series. I was brought up to dislike the Royals. Any other people in my age range, I just turned 50. So anyone who is, say, my age to 65, like all my older cousins, we were raised to not like the Royals. The Yankees and the Royals had a really heated rivalry. I mean, they hated each other. And I remember watching the Pine Tar game with my dad, and I loathed George Brett, loathed him. And I was so excited when he got upset about them calling him out and the freaking out with the dugout and everything. So when I was a kid, you didn't like the Royals, you didn't like the Red Sox, you didn't like the Dodgers, because those were the teams that the Yankees played in my era of baseball when I first started watching. So this is really interesting to me to have the Yankees and Royals be in a playoff series against each other. I know it's a division series. It's not an ALCS like 76 was, and that one was, my older cousins were at that game. They were at the Chambliss walk-off. So I'm looking forward to this, but I'm also cautiously looking forward to it, if that makes sense. That's all I'm saying. Look, I was burned 20 years ago talking smack about the Red Sox and how they never win anything, and that, you know, the Yankees could be down 20 runs in Game 7 and they'd still come back. That didn't happen. So yeah, just take it from me. Don't talk too much trash before the series starts. Just don't do it. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button on our videos, hit the notifications so you know when our videos go up. There's a Locked On Yankees Insiders Club. Normally, I would tell you to join it to ask Fan Mail Friday questions and get into the first segment, but tomorrow will be a preview of the division series, no Fan Mail Friday. There's a 14-day free trial. The link is in the description. You get text from me. You can text me questions, comments, reactions to the games, and I try to text you back if I remember Coming up next, let's talk about those wild card series. This episode of Locked On Yankees is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. Explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about, like Houston, Cleveland, Baltimore, Chicago, Boston. With hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com, you might just find your perfect stay even in your baseball rival's city during the postseason. Maybe it's time to taste test your baseball competition's stadium cuisine. Luckily, on Booking.com, you can find the stadium stay that's just right for you. I personally have used Booking.com a few times this year to book hotels in a major rival city, Boston. I know. Booking.com can help you book a stay that's close to Fenway if you want. No matter what team you're rooting for this postseason, Booking.com can make you a fan of any U.S. city. From hotels that overlook stadiums to family-friendly resorts to cute bed and breakfast stays, Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com. Booking.yeah. Don't forget, you can catch every pitch of the Yankees' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Yankees. All right, let's get into this. Tigers, Astros. You may have heard my big mouth when the final out of that game happened, because I was very happy to see the Astros finally get knocked out before they could make it to another ALCS. I'm sorry, I will always root against that team. If I make it to 95 and I have all my marbles and I'm in a nursing home and I'm watching baseball, I will root against that team. I don't care. What a job by the Tigers, honestly. They have been on fire for 2 months now, and they didn't let it get to them. They didn't panic when Houston went up 2-1 and it looked like they were changing the momentum of the game. Yeah, the Tigers were like, we got this. Doing it against Josh Hader and Ryan Presley, amazing. Ryan Presley was incredible in the playoffs, and he finally blew it with a wild pitch of all things. And then Josh Hader gives up the 3-run double, or bases clearing double, to Andy Ibanez, who pinch hit in that spot. So it went from the stadium being really loud and obnoxious because they took a 2-1 lead to within moments being completely deflated because they were down 5-2. And you could see it on the fans' faces. You could see it on the Houston players' faces. They knew it was over. They knew it was over. The Astros were not as good this year as they are in past years. They've had injury issues. They've lost some people. They've gained some people who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Josh Hader. So I didn't think that team was going to go far anyway, but I was just really happy. And let me say this, because other podcasts seem to think differently. Houston was not a dynasty. We're not changing the definition of a dynasty. They didn't win enough in a row. Just because you made 7 ALCSs in a row, that just means you can't take the next step. You only did it twice and one time you cheated. No, you're not a dynasty. Sorry. Anyway, moving on. Mets and Brewers. The Brewers actually stunned the Mets this time with 2 home runs to pull ahead in the 8th inning and win. And can we talk about Jackson Chourio? He's 20. The kid is 20 years old. To hit that kind of a home run and to hit 2 of them in a do or die game. This is why I don't have a problem with the idea of Ben Rice playing instead of Anthony Rizzo. And we talked about this with the Tigers. We talked about this with the Diamondbacks last year and teams like that. I know that people like to talk about playoff experience, but there's also something to be said for kids who are just excited to be there and want to do something about it. And, you saw it with Andrew Jones all those years ago. He was 19 when he was on the Braves and did what he did against the Yankees. So I was just really impressed with that performance. Also, how many Jacksons are there now in baseball? All these young kids who are named Jackson. It's amazing. So there's finally a game 3 in a wild card series. It happens today. Mets Brewers. It's the only one because every other series was a sweep. Yawn. The majority of wild card series have been sweeps. How do we feel about that? Brian and I talked about it. I believe on yesterday's show, he was talking about how he wishes it was back to the wild card game because it's more urgent that way. And it's boring seeing a 2-game sweep, isn't it? I feel like it is. And it's boring seeing that many 2-game sweeps. For one series to go 3 games, I don't know. Something needs to be done. And then we have the poor Braves. At least they scored in last night's game, but yeah, the poor Braves, they had no chance in that series. I said it before it began. They had no chance. They were limping in. They had no Chris Sale, no Acuna Jr., just nope. Although scary news for the Padres, Joe Musgrove left that game with left elbow tightness, which is what you never want to hear. You never want to hear elbow tightness or forearm tightness or biceps tightness because all that stuff is connected to your elbow and you just, that's a bad thing. Kyle Higashioka with another big hit. People were joking. I saw it on Twitter. I think maybe Talkin' Baseball put the graphic up that Kyle Higashioka has 2 home runs and Juan Soto has none in the playoffs. Obviously, Juan Soto hasn't played yet, but it's just funny that that's happening. Like I said, at least the Braves scored this time, so good for them. But yeah, they needed to go home. They wouldn't have been ready for a division series if they had somehow pulled this off against the Padres. They would have been obliterated by the Dodgers. So no. So how did my predictions go? Well, I thought the Mets were going to sweep. Obviously, I was wrong on that. I was right about the Braves getting swept out of San Diego, so I was correct on that. I said the Tigers were going to win and beat the Astros, but I thought it was going 3. So I was wrong on that, but I was also right on that. And I also thought the Orioles and Royals were going to go 3. And I wasn't sure who was going to win because I thought it could go either way with the way that the pitching was. One big hit could win the game, which is basically what happened in both of those games. So I was wrong about that. So I've only really been correct on the Braves. Let's look at some comments because some of you are in here. Nez TBG, Jackson Chourio the story reminds me of Jason Dominguez, but the difference was that Chourio was put in a position to fail early and the Yankees waited till 2 weeks before the end of the season. Don't get me started on the Dominguez stuff. Do not get me. Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, this one, the comments moved. Sale did have a really great season, but it's kind of fishy that the Braves made no mention of the fact that he was actually hurt. He'd actually been hurt since September 19th. And I spoke about this the other day on the show that people were coming up with conspiracy theories that the Braves didn't want to move up the games against the Mets because they didn't want to reveal that something was really wrong with Sale. And they were hoping that by the time the wild card happened, they were hoping that the weekend would make it so they were just automatically in the playoffs and they wouldn't have to play the Mets in those games. And then they were hoping that by the wild card series, Sale would feel better. And that just didn't work out for them. So it's interesting. Let's see. Casbarad 10. The Yankees will smack Michael Wacha around. He really, really sucks. 5.09 ERA, pure trash. He's been better this season. And, sometimes it doesn't matter when a guy has a 5 ERA in the playoffs or whenever he has the 5 ERA because the Yankees sometimes have issues against guys with high ERAs. Yes, this is my thought too. Natalie says the Tigers have nothing to lose at this point, which makes them pretty dangerous. Yeah, they really do. No one expected this. Obviously, they had to play out of their minds in order to do what they did. They were 10 games out in early August, 10 games out of a wild card spot. And they played out of their minds. And when you have a whole bunch of people on a team playing like that, they're really dangerous. They have nothing, they really do have nothing to lose. It wouldn't be a failure if they lost in the division series because no one expected them to be there. I think the Cleveland Tiger series is going to be really good. I think so. It's also interesting how the AL Central has 3 teams in the division series and the vaunted AL East only has 1. Actually, the Yankees are the last AL East team to win a playoff game. The Rays were swept out, right, last year. The Jays were swept out. The Orioles were swept out. Actually, the Jays were swept out twice, right? 22 and 23. So, yeah, the Yankees are the last AL East team to win a playoff game. That's pretty funny. That's pretty funny. All right, coming up next, I'm going to pay tribute to the man who made all of this possible. Hey, NFL fans, you can start this season off with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Honestly, I went to FanDuel earlier, and there's so much stuff to look at there. But because we're a baseball podcast, here are your Yankee numbers for the division series against the Royals as of noon Thursday, October 3rd. These are obviously subject to change. The Yankees are at plus 105 in game 1, which sees Garrett Cole against Michael Wacha. That's the spread. For money, they're minus 198. And Aaron Judge is at plus 240 to hit a home run in game 1. You can also bet on what you think the final score will be. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And Locked On Yankees is also sponsored by Prize Picks, which is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. And you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You want to play Prize Picks against Drewski, or alongside Drewski, not against him, Joe Budden and MMA champ Sugar Sean O'Malley, cool name. You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. And Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are safe, fast, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as quickly as 15 minutes. That's amazing. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Remember, you can catch every pitch of the Yankees hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Yankees. Okay, so I said we were going to pay tribute to someone. My father. My father, Gus Gotsoulias, born Konstantin Gotsoulias in the Bronx, New York, is the reason why I do what I do. If it wasn't for my father, I wouldn't be the rabid Yankee fan I am. I wouldn't have started writing about baseball or the Yankees, and I wouldn't be doing this show if it wasn't for my father. And the reason I bring him up is today is the 10th anniversary of his passing. And I hope I get through this without crying. And if I do cry, don't make fun of me. So when I was a kid, I was the firstborn, and I would sit with my father and watch every sport with him. And he watched everything. I mean, he even watched Cosmos soccer. He watched Bowling for Dollars. He watched the Nets before they were in the NBA. So I watched basketball. I watched hockey. I watched football, obviously baseball, just everything with him. And he's the reason why I am the way I am. And I've told this story before, but my father's uncle, his namesake, Gus, was actually a New York Giants fan. And he would bring my father to the Polo Grounds and try to change his fandom or his affiliation. And my dad was always refusing, like, no way, I'm never not liking the Yankees. My dad was born in 1941. He started going to Yankee games in the very late 40s, early 50s. So think about the people that he saw play in Yankee Stadium. My yaya would pack him a lunch, give him, I think, 5 or 10 cents for him to sit in the bleachers, and he would hang out there on summer days watching the Yankees and watching guys like Yogi Berra and Mickey Mantle. He watched Whitey Ford when he was older. He saw all those people. And it's just amazing to think about. And I told this story too, because we were talking about it one time and I said, wow, you saw so many great players, Dad. And he said, well, you've seen a lot of great players. This was a while ago. And he said, when you have kids, you can talk to them about seeing Derek Jeter and Mariano Rivera. And this was, like 20 years before they even made the Hall of Fame. But he knew those guys were going to be great. And alas, I did not have children. I will not have grandchildren, so I won't be able to tell them about the Yankees. But, if I did, I would. So, oh, yes. Hold on. This comment, FG or F, yeah, says, I remember Bowling for Dollars in the 70s. It was hosted by Bob Murphy, the Mets broadcaster. Yeah, Bowling for Dollars was all over I think it was all over the country. They had different versions of it and it was all local. So everyone had different hosts. I also, yes, my dad watched the ABA before they merged with the NBA. Bowling for Dollars was so much fun. I remember the people coming out of the curtain and then you just had like the 2 lanes where the people bowled. But I watched Met games with my father too, because my dad wasn't the type of guy who he didn't bring me up to dislike the Mets. The Mets weren't a rival with the Yankees. They were in a completely different league. And as I said earlier, I was brought up to dislike the Royals, the Red Sox, and the Dodgers. Not the Mets. So we watched Met games when I was growing up. He took my cousins to Met games because my cousin's parents divorced and my dad would take them to Shea Stadium because they lived out on Long Island. They became Met fans when they were kids and he would take them to Shea Stadium. My dad was at the infamous NLCS game when, who fought in that game? Buddy Harrelson? Was that the fight? My dad was there with my mother on a date day, sitting right by first base. And my dad said that the out was made. He reached down to get his drink. He looked up and all of a sudden he just saw all these people fighting in the NLCS, 1973, I believe that was. So yeah, it's hard to, yes, Bud Harrelson and Pete Rose. Yeah, right. Amazing. It's hard to believe that my dad's been gone 10 years. Kind of crazy because I still expect to see him, every once in a while. And it's odd because it's been so long that every once in a while, I almost forget that he's not here, which is a really weird occurrence, with grief. There was a time, it was the 2015 All-Star. It was the home run derby. I was cat sitting down in Maryland and I was talking to my mom on the phone and I nearly said, can I talk to Dad? And when I hung up, I cried for 20 minutes because I couldn't believe I forgot he was not around anymore. So, yeah. I watched Derek Jeter's last home game with my father. He was in the hospital at the time. He saw Jeter's double in the beginning of the game, and then he fell asleep. He wasn't feeling good that night. He had a fever. And when Jeter hit his walk-off, I had to be really quiet because I didn't want to wake him up. I also didn't want to wake up the other patients in the hospital. So I basically was jumping up and down in the room without making noise and very excited. And then the next morning, my dad coded and they brought him back. And then a couple days later, we found out that the brain damage was catastrophic and irreversible, and he would never be my dad again. And then we ended up taking him off the machines October 3rd, 2014. And I almost made it. I almost made it. It was a beautiful experience being there with him when he transitioned. Took a half hour. TV shows are not real. Movies are not real. when they turn off the machines, it's not 2 seconds, it's not 5 seconds. It took a half hour for them to disconnect everything and for him to finally pass. So I just want to let you guys know that in case you haven't experienced it. It's not a quick thing. Because we were standing there, and even in my brain, I was thinking to myself, why is this taking so long? This is torture, you know? But it was a very beautiful moment. We were all surrounding him, and we were there when it happened. So, yeah. But I can't watch Derek Jeter's walk-off still to this day. And they play it every time I'm at the stadium. And every time I'm at the stadium, I have to shield my eyes because it makes me cry every time. Every time. So, yeah, so that's my tribute to my dad. I wrote a piece about him on the Hardball Times. I think it's still up on the internet. It's called My Dad and the Yankees. So if you Google my name, my full name with My Dad and the Yankees, it should pop up. It's a kind of long read. I think it's like 2,500 to 3,000 words, but it's an easy read. I just basically tell the story of me and my dad. So if you want to read that, feel free and let me know in the comments if you do read it and what you think of it. So yeah, if it wasn't for my father, I wouldn't be doing this, honestly. He's the reason why I'm a crazy Yankee fan. He brought me to my first Yankee games, took me to a single admission doubleheader against the Toronto Blue Jays. Yankees swept. Ron Guidry pitched a complete game in one of the games. I believe it was the other game the Yankees hit 4 home runs. My dad talked to Dave Winfield between the 2 games because Dave Winfield was playing left field because it was 1983. And the fence went all the way back to the wall so he could talk to Dave Winfield. We were in the first row of left field. And I was just in awe because I had only seen Dave Winfield on TV. And he was so tall, it almost looked like he was at the top of the wall. He wasn't, but it looked like he was. And he was just chatting with my dad. And it was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. So thank you, Dad, for making me the way I am. I will say this. I got a Yankee tattoo. On November 27th, 2005, a friend of mine was getting a tattoo. I wasn't going to get one. I was just going with her for emotional support because she was getting this giant thing on her hip. And she dared me to get a tattoo because I always toyed with the idea of getting a Yankee tattoo. And once she dared me and said that she would pay for it, I said, all right, I'll get the tattoo. So I got the tattoo. I was afraid to tell my father. Now, if you do the math, you know I'm 50 years old now, which means I was 31 when I got that tattoo. I was living on my own in Manhattan, and I was still afraid to tell my dad. So I finally gave in about 2 weeks later, and I was on the phone with him, and I said, I have to tell you something. And he said, what? I said, I got a tattoo. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he started talking about something else, and I just thought, okay. So about 5 minutes later, I said, well, aren't you going to ask me what I got? And he said, I know you. You got a Yankee tattoo. So, yeah. So, recap. Yankees, Orioles, no, that's not right. Yankees, Royals. Try and say Orioles and Royals back to back. You can't do it. It's hard. Orioles, Royals. Orioles, Royals. It's not easy to say. So, Yankees, Royals. This weekend, we will have a full preview on tomorrow's show. It's going to be another live stream because we're just doing daytime shows because it's just easier this way. Brian had a staggered working schedule, so it's easier to do the daytime. So I believe it's going to be at 2 tomorrow, which I know is a very strange time, but that's what we're scheduling it for. So that'll be the full preview. And if you can't make the live stream, just listen to us afterwards, watch it afterwards. It'll be fine. Thank you all for joining me for this live edition again of Locked On Yankees. And as we said on yesterday's show, we will be going live more after the playoff games. So we'll be going live late depending on when they end. And it'll be interesting. We're almost there. One more time, you can catch every pitch of the Yankees hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Yankees. Thank you for making Locked On Yankees your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. The link to Locked On MLB is in our description, so you don't need to search. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure you check out the Locked On Yankees postcast right here on the Locked On Yankees podcast feed. That would be audio, as well as streaming on the Locked On Sports New York YouTube channel. Get rapid reaction to all the biggest moments with the Locked On Yankees postcast. So that'll do it for this live edition of Locked On Yankees. I'm Stacey Gotsoulias, and I will see you tomorrow for a preview along with Brian.